you're watching this, chances are you've just finished your GCSEs and you're heading into A-levels next year. So congrats on finishing your GCSEs, that is great. But here's something you definitely don't want to realize too late. A-levels is a completely different ballgame. You definitely can't rely on the school system just by itself, and you also can't cram like you can in GCSE, right? That cramming kind of methodology, that's all gone. You'll get punished hard for that. As a result, self-studying in your A-level journey is absolutely essential. And so by the end of this video, what I'm going to give you is a pretty basic framework that has helped me a lot, and it also shares a lot of its principles with one of the best self-studies in history, Napoleon. And make sure to stick to the end, because without the third principle, the first two are basically redundant. Now, just before we get started, I want to give a massive shout out to the channel 5 Minutes Late. He did a very similar video which basically forms the inspiration. When I saw it, I thought it'd be really cool to adapt it for an A-level context, right? So big shout out to him, and you can go check out the original inspiration for this video down below. Now, the first principle here is purpose. Napoleon is known as a great general, but what are the foundations behind this? Now, part of that answer lies in his obsessive drive for self-education. But think about it, self-education in of itself is actually trivial. So what was he self-educating for? What was his purpose for studying so much? Well, at least when he was in the period at Brienne, a big part of his self-education was studying literature and history so that he could better understand upper French society, which could better make him understand the context he was living in. Because at the end of the day, you gotta remember, this is taking place just before the French Revolution, right? So that was a fire burning in French society. So he obviously had a concrete purpose for extracurricular studying, okay? Now, how can the idea of studying for a purpose 200 plus years ago be applied in an A-level context? We've all been there, right? This is you, okay? You're there, GCSEs, sitting on a chair, terrible chair, I know, and you are studying, okay? This is your pencil and paper, you're studying. And this is some random subject that you've picked. You're not really sure why you've picked it. You've sort of just, gone with the flow, so to speak, and you needed something to fill the gaps in GCSE, so you picked it. Now, what you notice is when you're studying is that you keep procrastinating. The exam's in 2 weeks, okay, and you don't start studying. The exam's in 1 week and you don't start studying. The exam is a day away and you still haven't started studying yet, right? And why is it that your brain just can't sit down to do the hard work for the subject? Well, it's because you have no purpose, okay? You've got no reason to be doing that subject in the first place. And so what your brain does, it just turns off, right? And your brain turning off in A-levels is extremely dangerous, because A-levels has so much more depth than GCSEs. That's what we need to realize, is that, again, just from the intro when I spoke about it, is that A-levels is a completely different ballgame, okay? It's designed to prep you for university. And the way you need to think about this, right, is that when you are picking your subjects, okay, you need to have some kind of idea in your head of how that maps into your goals, okay? If you don't have any goals, any kind of reasoning behind it, I guess you could argue that your parents making you do it is a purpose, but it's not really a strong one, right? Ideally, you want to have some kind of clear idea, okay, trajectory for yourself of why exactly you're doing it. So for instance, let's take the maths example, right? Okay, this is a general thing. So you've got fail. Okay, the fear of failure, which ties into a purpose, which can be effective. It can be effective, but ideally, what you want is gain as well, right? So the fail ones, the fail kind of subcomponents of purpose are things like an exam, right? An exam around the corner. That makes you want to study for this. The other subcomponent of a failure type of mindset, not failure mindset, but you get what I'm saying. The other subcomponent of this would be something like, I want to do engineering, and I'm not really a big fan of maths, but I need to do it because I'm passionate about engineering, even though I don't really like the maths component, then fine, at least you've got a purpose for that, right? And then on the other side, you've got a gain, which is something like I want to do like mechatronics, I want to get like a PhD. So this maths, even though there's going to be tricky parts to it, I can get involved in it. Okay, I understand that this is necessary, and I want to do this maths as a result. I'm willing to put up with the difficulty it's going to present to me because I've got this like PhD ambition, right? Just for example, I know that ties in similarly to the engineering example, but the basic premise here is that without a purpose for why you're studying, okay, in A-levels, it's going to be extremely difficult to actually not procrastinate. Now, having a purpose is all well and good, but what happens when you sit down to put that knowledge now into practice, but that knowledge that you've studied doesn't really fit the situation that you're applying it to? Say, for instance, a past paper question. Now, this is something that Napoleon really embodied, less so from a formal studying perspective, but just in a method of thinking, okay, which I think is really helpful. He'd study the battlefield beforehand and the enemy armies, the logistics, movements, etc., in really, really minute detail. And what that formed was essentially like seeds in his mind that allowed him to iterate and adapt to different situations. And when you're studying, that can be a very helpful analogy to use, okay? You need to be putting things into action and iterate quickly. Now, you've probably guessed it. Okay, cool. What does this mean for me now? I'm just a student doing A-levels. Now, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on the side, and I used to suck quite a bit at it. But once I started implementing something into my process, I suddenly started to see a lot more improvement. I got a lot better. Okay, now what is that? And I've spoke about this in a few other videos. Nothing novel, nothing too new, but that is a feedback loop. Okay, specifically in the form of act, assess, adjust. Okay, act. This is a good little shorthand that to use, and this comes from a concept written by a guy called MJ DeMarco. I'll put a link to him below on this, but this is really helpful. The basic idea, okay, is part of the feedback loop. Is you want to make sure that when you're doing A-levels, for instance, let's say A-level maths here, you're studying your knowledge. Okay, brilliant. Now you need to put that into practice quickly, right? Now, what does that look like? Well, what that looks like is doing past paper questions, okay, doing active recall. Nothing new, nothing novel, but what you need to be doing is you need to be taking a precise log of where you're going wrong. And that's where the assess part comes in, okay? That's where the assess part comes in. And there's a great example of this with a guy in India. He ranked number 1 out of millions in the Indian final exam. And the way he used to assess was he'd log all of his mistakes in a consolidated document, okay? In a consolidated document, which meant that when he was studying now, he had all of his mistakes logged in here, which means he could go back, okay, and use this document to constantly refine his process, okay? So it's extremely useful. Now, I'll use a jiu-jitsu example. How have I been doing this? Right, so example, what I've got here, these are situations where people have been beating me, right? So for instance, over here, there's something in jiu-jitsu called a front headlock. Okay, it's basically like a normal headlock in a fight, but I kept on getting stuck in it. Okay, so what I've done is I log this down into the document I've got, okay? And what I've done is I've gone back and I've looked at solutions to this problem, okay? I'm tracking the problem. And so what I've done here in yellow is I've basically tracked solutions to it, okay? So now this problem is not going to arise much more. Now again, this seems all very simple, but at the end of the day, look, a lot of things are just simple. A lot of the best things are just simple, but you just refine it better, right? So this is just a very good way of just logging your mistakes. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, because in an A-level context, okay, what you need is to be able to do this on repeat, okay? It creates a feedback loop. You need to be doing it quickly. This is where I went wrong in AS, okay? I had too long of a feedback loop. I wasn't refining and iterating quickly enough. So what I did was I did Cambridge, right? So in Cambridge, AS is connected to A-levels. In AS, I'd do the paper, do past papers, do questions, but I wouldn't refine it enough, right? I didn't have a consolidated sheet of where I was going wrong. I didn't, excuse me, I wasn't able to accurately log all my mistakes. I was just marking it, tick, cross, loosely kind of going into, where I went wrong. And so my adjustment wasn't as, it wasn't as powerful as well, okay? I wasn't able to adjust as powerfully. And so what happened was, okay, cool. That was AS, didn't do so great. In A-level though, I really got my act together. And so I managed to pull up my final grade by quite a bit. Now I got 2 percentage points off an A just because my AS grade pulled me down. So I ended up getting 2 percentage points off an A. But, with that kind of knowledge and process, I was able to go forward and get a degree in applied maths, right? So having this process, this is a meta skill really for just learning anything. But it's very simple, but applying it takes a bit of time because it's tracking, but it's totally worth it. Now, what about that final principle that I alluded to in the beginning? The principle where, without it, nothing else matters. Well, that can be condensed into one sentence. Different subjects and different affairs are arranged in my head as in a cupboard. When I wish to interrupt one train of thought, I shut that drawer and open another. Do I wish to sleep? I simply close all the drawers and there I am, asleep. Now, what this is a symptom of is the fact that Napoleon was known to be really, really good at focusing. And it goes without saying that when you are self-studying, that degree of focus is essential to really move the needle and make progress when you are self-studying. So what does this look like in the 21st century A-levels context? Now, why can't you focus, okay? Why can't you focus for 2 hours straight, whereas it seems like everyone else can? Let me guess, when you get home, you go back, you're kind of tired, and you jump in your bed, jump on the sofa, and you get a notification on your phone, okay? And, you just start scrolling innocently, just going through YouTube, social media, Instagram, whatever. And next thing you know, you're kind of, sucked into this kind of algorithm where you're just watching content. And then you're like, okay, fine, well, okay, I probably need to start studying now. An hour and a half's gone by, so you jump back into the desk, onto the desk, or onto the chair, okay, and you start studying. You do maybe 30 minutes, you're doing the Pomodoro technique or whatever, and then you're like, okay, I kind of need a break, and then you get another notification on your phone, you start looking at YouTube videos, and that break maybe takes about 20 minutes, right? Just scrolling, chilling out on your phone, and then you decide to go back. So you've done about 30 minutes of study, maybe about 20 minutes, maybe even more, of social media, right? Terrible handwriting, I know, but apologies, I'm using a mouse here. Now, why do I say this? I say this because this is exactly the issue I had when I was younger, and I wish I could have fixed it when I was doing my A-levels. I probably would have done a lot better. What I've been able to do now is, as I've grown older, I've been able to, and again, this is not me talking like I'm all preachy. Again, I'm not a guru, I'm not like an expert or anything like that. I simply made this video to try basically guide a younger version of me in many ways, right? But essentially, what is key, right? This helped me, is that you need to realize your brain, okay, needs to be starved. Okay, you need to starve your brain of distractions. Okay, and this ties back into the Napoleon principle before, of being able to just have a laser focus on a specific topic, one specific topic at a time. And having a bunch of distractions with like social media and stuff, and this is what I used to do. I used to do like the Pomodoro technique, 30 minutes, and then my break would just be me scrolling, like going on YouTube scrolling, going on Instagram scrolling. So like really the net of that, right? Think about it. A session, 30 minutes study, 20 minutes scrolling, and this tires me out. So it's like, what am I actually achieving here? Like, I'm not really getting much done. And the reason for that is because I was constantly distracted, right? So what's the actionable step here that can help you, as it's helped me, to really kind of like boost your focus? Okay, I'm not talking like a BS method, I'm talking like a real method. Okay, because a lot of people talk about Pomodoro, hasn't really worked for me. So what at least has helped me, all right, is just basically deleting social media from my phone completely, right? And what that means is my phone is simply now a communication device. So by doing that, you're able to starve your brain. At least I've been able to starve my brain. It's worked for me, where now if I want to focus on a task, my brain can do it because it's just bored. Like, there's nothing else to do, right? Going outside, seeing friends as a break is great because it's a different context, right? It's like you're still able to focus solely on that task. I think the key thing really comes down to just like micro distractions, okay, that kind of context switching, that rapid context switching. But now it's like I'm able to focus like for 2 hours straight plus, maybe about 2 to 4 hours, right? 3.5 maybe. 3.5 to 4 hours. Okay, but that's just because I feel like now I've starved my brain to a large extent, and it just makes things it's a lot easier to study. So the actual step I'd recommend for you is, again, it's pretty simple. It's nothing novel, but it's hard to do, right? Just like really cut out distractions from your phone. Like delete. We like to think we've got good willpower, but chances are, subliminally, on a break, you will go and check Instagram, right? So if you're in a season where you really need to focus, what I advise you to do is literally just delete it from your phone. You have to delete your account because it can be useful, but just delete it from your phone so that like you don't have that need to now just subconsciously go on your phone, right? So that's been extremely useful, at least for me. And what you'll notice is that by starving your brain and by waking up, for instance, in the morning and having the goal to say like, okay, like after school, so after school, this is a non-negotiable. I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna work for like an hour and a half. Okay, I'm gonna study this subject for an hour and a half. Non-negotiable. Boom. Then it's like, okay, you're committed to that, and you're able to enter into flow state. That's why actually, when I started studying for longer periods of time, I actually found it was better compared to the modern wisdom that says like you need to do like 30 minutes to like 45 minutes of honed in focus. Maybe that's true, but at least for me, what I can say is by doing like longer sessions, I'm able to get into a flow state, and that's really helped me. So the key principle there is, as much as possible, really eliminate distractions. Don't fool yourself. Don't like go with like a bunch of like internet guru BS. Like really just think about it. Back in the day, these like people who were studying hard, they didn't have distractions we have today. Okay, they were able to do this pretty easily. So there's no reason why you can't either.